So, what do you think?
Now that looks a lot better than paper.
I knew you would like it.
But there's only one problem.
What now?
Where's the entrance?
You're right. We need an entrance. Well, whenever I'm working in the house, I always have to use some sort of spray foam. So, whenever there's extra left, I will make big clumps of spray foam. So, I had this big piece of spray foam left over I had cut a piece out to use in a different project, and it kind of looked like a cave already. So, I used that. So, I just did my shaping of it, and then I took 2-inch foam and started cutting out rocks. I had a sort of an idea in my head, so I just kept cutting rocks more and more. I figured they would just pile on and figure it out somehow. That's the one good thing about foam. Just keep cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. So I just did a dry placement to see how it would look, and things were starting to look good. So I would just get a general idea of what shapes were needed as I was dry stacking the pieces on top of each other. I knew it would probably change as the project went on. So then I had a piece of I think that's 3/4 inch or half inch foam. I use that as a base, and I was just doing more dry stacking and cutting more and more rocks. I put my little figures on there to see how the size of the entrance would look, and looked pretty good. Just kept trimming rocks till it looked like everything was supposed to be there. It was looking pretty good. Dry placement was doing good. Once I was happy with all the different shape rocks I had quite a big pile. Then it was time to just do the roughing up, sanding out any points and flat spots, and just giving the rocks more of a rock texture with my little sanding block. Then it was time to do some joint compound in the inside of the cave. Now I know a lot of people don't like joint compound. I like it because it's cheap and easy, and it's still pliable that if I have to make changes, which you'll see later, I did make some changes to the outside, and if I would have used plaster, it would have been a lot harder to cut. But for me, I don't care if it cracks because it's inside of a cave, so it's rock, and rocks crack. Then I did the regular old Mod Podge and black paint over the joint compound after it was dry. When that was dry, just did a regular dark gray. Again, not too critical because it's the inside and it's going to be dark. Then it was time to paint all the rocks with the Mod Podge and black paint. And paint most of my fingers too. I outlined the inside of the cave so I could do a coat of brown, because once it was glued on there I wouldn't really be able to paint it too well. So I just used a burnt umber, put that down, and then it was time to glue it using the tacky glue. Glued it down. Then it was time to coat the outside with the plaster, or not the plaster, the joint compound again. It's like icing a cake. Also gives it a rough texture, gives it more of a ground texture, I think, anyway, after it's painted. You just sand down some of the high spots. Then I painted that with a mixture of Mod Podge and burnt umber to give it more of a brown base coat instead of black. The rocks then got a coat of dark gray because rocks look good gray. Then they got highlighted with a lighter gray. Now I didn't do a black wash on these because I thought they looked kind of good just the way they were, and it saved me a lot of time. Then I started doing my rock placement using the tacky glue again. Tacky glue works really good because it doesn't slide like regular glue. The rocks seemed to pretty much fall right into place as I was, stacking them on top of each other. A little trial and error, but it worked. And then, once again, there was I didn't have any rhyme or reason. I didn't have a plan. Then it just looked like a big turkey to me, and I didn't really like the shape. So I started to cut more off the back to give it more of a hill of a slope. And that's, again, like I said, I'm happy I didn't use plaster because it would have been pretty hard to cut through, I think. And the joint compound's a little softer to cut through, but it's tough enough when it's dry, I think. Then once I was finally happy with the shape I had, it was time to put more of the joint compound on again. And then I would have to coat it again with the Mod Podge and brown. Once that was nice and dry, I had to cut up the base because rectangle just didn't look good. So cut that to the shape I liked, and then had to Mod Podge and brown that to coat that all. I decided to highlight the rocks again. So I used, like a taupe color, a little bit of off-white. I did some burnt umber and like an olive green to dirty the rocks up quite a bit. Once I was happy with that, I applied glue to the front base to add some flocking. I used the dark flocking there to give it more of a path look. Just throw it in there. Applied glue to the rest of it to add more flocking. I used the green flocking on the back side to give it more of a nice forest look. You'll see when I add the trees later. Then it was time to add some little rocks. I had some small talus rocks. I painted them the gray, and then I had really tiny rocks. Everything was painted gray. Placed them in between all the bigger rocks to make it look like rubble. Then when I was happy with that placement, I started adding bushes, just regular old green lichen. When the lichen was done, then I started to do some long static grass that I did by hand. I would just pinch a bunch between my fingers and roll it, and then just stick it in a blob of glue. I did that mostly in between the rocks. It looked like, grass growing up between the rocks. Seems to work pretty well, the technique. I'm just doing it that way instead of using a static applicator. I'm doing more clumps. Then I added more glue down to the front, and I had a bag of what I call dirty grass. It's just scraps from other projects that's all mixed together, and it gives it a nice blended look of different types of flocking. Added smaller shrubs to give it more of a dense look. Then it was time to add the trees to the back. Gave it a nice finished look. Those were ready-made trees. Just poked some holes in, put the glue in, and placed the trees. And one little tree, and it was done. Then I went back and I took some glue and I mixed in some like olive green and a little bit of dark green flocking to the glue to make some moss, give it a moss type effect. And I applied that to the tops and the sides of the rocks. I think it gives it more of a finished look. Then I did the same thing to the trunks of the trees. So I know in my yard there's moss on all the trees. And that was it. Now how's that for an entrance?
That's pretty cool.
Right?
But where's the stairs to go to the dungeon?
Oh, I forgot to make the stairs.
Oh.